Hi, I'm going to read you something that I wrote on Facebook the other day, and Haven's going to join me in a second. But this is for all you mamas out there who are feeling sad and scared for your kids. You know, like they always ask in business, what keeps you up at night? What keeps the person you're trying to serve up at night? And right now, what keeps me up at night is, it used to be that I was afraid for my own mental wellness. And now I'm really actually afraid for other people's, the state that the world is in right now. And I'm not saying this in a fear-mongering way. I'm hopefully here to help you navigate that fear of like, how can I best suit my kids when I'm basically looking at life between a rock and a hard place and not seeing any soft landing that makes sense. And that's what COVID has done in this situation for us and for our family. So I'm going to read something to you, and then she's going to come in and talk to you in a second. This is what I wrote on Facebook. She begged me to put her in school. Oh, wait, that's not it. Duh. Okay. It's only taken 3 months for this little girl to go from drawing hearts and hand-holding smiley stick figures to drawing sad faces looking away from each other. She was curled up on her bedroom floor last night in a sob, trying to muster a clear, "My heart is broken." She begged me to put her in school earlier than I thought was best. Her birthday is the day after cutoff, so she'll inevitably always be the youngest in her class, just like I was. Her first grade friends stopped playing with her when they asked her if she knew Jehovah, and she said no. Now they trick her by asking her to play sometimes and running away, but always saying no when she asks them to play. They tell her her shapes aren't good, her art is dumb, and that her other friends aren't actually her friends. I tell her to trust her gut, and she sobs, saying she always feels like they're making fun of her even when it seems like they're not. And I tell her again to trust her gut, and she brokenheartedly says, "I don't like my BFFs anymore," which she actually says is BBFs because she's adorable and innocent. No matter how many times I tell her it's BFFs. Not only does she display the same learning disabilities as I did, despite how smart she is, she doesn't feel safe with her teacher, who she says yells a lot. I fear that so many of our kids are going through this as they are expected to know socialization when they've been quarantined from it. And there are no teachers who are allowed to get on the floor with them and mediate and guide. There are no teachers to show them smiles when they look to them for reassurance. What they see is a mask, a literal one, not even an invisible one. My heart is broken when I sit back and think all I can do is watch. My heart is broken to know that this is probably happening to millions of kids who don't have the internal family resources to know it's happening at all, and they just slowly go from colorful to gray, and we call this growing up. I've been super tight about my mental wellness over the last couple of years because I've watched it wane more times than not. I've been walking a tightrope, mending broken hearts everywhere, every day. I keep thinking I don't have the bandwidth to take anymore, probably how everyone who actually cares feels. But her little soaking wet body, wrapped in a fetal position, attempting to muster, "My heart is broken," gives me enough internal rage to conjure up the reality that I must create the bandwidth if we're collectively gonna get through this without the light switch of my daughter's essence switching off until she's 35, only turned on again after years of therapy and self-work. I never want to have to do this to make her look as dumb as they call her, but I know all too well because this was my whole first grade experience, and we weren't even in the middle of a pandemic that is breaking down even alternative infrastructures and turning them mainstream. That if I keep her in first grade, her whole schooling experience will be a one long, grueling game of catch-up. The catch doesn't feel worth throwing the line in this way. A 6-month difference in brain development in childhood matters a lot. I wanted to keep her back last year, but everyone pushed for normalcy, and by all external accounts, she does quite well. But now I'm left with a system I'm not sure will be able to accommodate her as one exhausted mother who knows she must. She begged me to take her out of school for her heart, her words. I thought a Waldorf school would be our salvation, but in the end, it always comes back to that salvation is inner work and outer faith. In the words of Sai, who's my toddler, it's super scary to consider that our salvation will mean more work on top of our already attempts at staying sane in the midst of global insanity. But I think homeschooling is a card on my table right now that for her heart, I may have to play. I'm super grateful that my business has been wrapped around my priority of mothering, but homeschooling with a toddler at home, messing up the whole thing constantly while staying in business feels heavier than I currently feel equipped to carry. But I remember in first grade begging and pleading and sobbing to be gifted a new teacher, and being told, this is life, you better get used to it. I will not watch my colorful daughter go from being a rainbow to a rain cloud like I did and call it normal. I will first ask the school for alternatives, but I'm gathering that I'll get more of the same. Basically, I'm saying that homeschooling, which in ways feels like the worst option, is the only option for us at this point. I'm open to alternative suggestions and feel terrible to think that the kids making fun of her now will see her over the next few years a grade lower and laugh at how right they are that she's not as cool and smart as they are if I pulled her back. But for her to actually stay cool and smart for her own life and sanity, her only options are being seen that way by those kids, or not being seen there, the place she has excitedly wanted to be at all. Rock, hard place. Her heart is broken. I will conjure up the will to mend it, even if I don't think I'm currently strong enough. Please wish me love. So I know that being a young mom, I was forced into situations by doctors, by the system, by school professionals that told me untruths and said that they were true. And I know that it is uncomfortable to sit with a mother's intuition in the face of either science or suggestion that just absolutely doesn't feel what is that you should be doing, right? And I remember, back in the day in my first grade experience, this lady was tenured. There was, I think, 6 kids that were removed from that class that year. I used to throw up every single morning before school, had diarrhea every single morning. The doctors told my mom that it was stress. And she said, you're going to have a boss one day that hates you. You better get used to it. I share that a lot. That impact was huge in my life. And if you pay attention to DNA sequence and timelines, there was years I couldn't even walk by a first grade classroom. I was so triggered by it. So here I have this daughter who's having a first grade experience that's similar to my own, despite that I've put her in situations that should, by all accounts, not, that shouldn't be what's going on here, right? She doesn't feel safe with her teachers, and I'm not downing her teachers, or I understand that every alternative institution is theoretically in between a rock and a hard place right now as it is, but these kids are not even able to see their teachers' faces, and they're expected to learn. They're not even able to see a smile from the person who is supposed to be influencing them and loving them every day. As a teacher myself, I would literally get under the table with students that were having hard times, right? Like I would get under there, get in their dog cage that they would create for themselves to feel safe. And that's how these kids are needed to be taught. And what is happening is there's somebody executively standing over them, directing orders from 6 feet apart, and there's no place for touch. That same exact night she got in my lap and she's crying and she said, Mommy, I'm not even allowed to touch people. Human touch is essential, right? I made a video about this before and people were saying I'm an alarmist. Here we are 2 years later into this pandemic, and these kids are forced to wear masks. They're forced to, would it be expected to socialize? When socialization is taught when they touch, when they play like cubs, animal cubs. Socialization is taught when they're allowed to connect with each other, actually see each other. My daughter is so intuitive. She's 6 years old and she says, I can and it's not even paranoia. I mean, trust your gut, little girl. Like, she says, I feel like they're tricking me, but they're being nice to my face. I mean, I know exactly what that's like, right? I'm sure you do too if you're attracted to my channel. And I don't feel like I have the mental bandwidth to buck up against the system. I'm definitely not going to rebel against it. I definitely don't want my kid to be somewhere where I'm the mom, like raising hell to get her what she needs, because it just doesn't feel right. I don't want to live in that kind of friction. I want to be in flow, right? And it doesn't feel like flow to have to consider that I still am a co-sleeping nursing mom of my toddler, and I'm to be homeschooling, and I actually 3 of my kids are going to be home, and I'm going to work from home, and it doesn't super feel like an easy decision to make. It feels like a really hard decision to make, and it feels like the only decision that I can make. Yes, there are alternatives as far as like cyber schooling and things like that. There are alternatives that I can be looking into, but for us, pulling her and not, there's the elements of, well, she's not going to be liked anywhere, like everywhere she goes, right? So she should stick with it. This is what my mom said about me in first grade. People aren't going to like you, deal with it, and this is life. Well, no, this is not life. A normal, healthy parent that actually loves their child. And that's the thing that makes me so scared and sad. I know that people are so stressed out, they don't even have time to get on the floor with their kid and know that this is happening. If I wasn't who I am, Haven wouldn't be having this conversation with me. She tells Chris every day, oh, I had a good day, I'm great. She doesn't even tell him what she tells me. And I think that that's because I am more of I get on the ground with her, even though he plays with her a lot. He's very like playing kind of over her, if that makes sense. Like, he's tall, he's like over her. And when I get on the ground, she tells me all this stuff, and I've pulled her out. And there's a little bit of shame in me in this, right? Because my mom kept me in things because she didn't want me to be a quitter. Well, guess what? I'm a freaking quitter. I'm a quitter. And she kept me in everything so I wouldn't be. And her making me stay in everything, I think probably to some degree contributed to that. But then there's the other end of the spectrum. I've pulled her out of 3 places that weren't good for her. And my family's going, what are you going to do? Just wipe her ass all the time? Like, make her comfortable? Yes, it's exactly what I'm going to do until she finds her groove. Because she definitely displays the exact same, I want to call it abilities of learning as me, but I didn't know how to read until I was in like high school. I literally mean that. She displays the same kind of like, her brain makes connections differently than other kids. It's just that simple. And I was that kid. And everybody just kept pushing me through. And it worked out in the end, sure, right? Like, I am so grateful to be here where I am. But that's the thing too, is that I am so grateful to be able to be an advocate for something I don't actually feel like I necessarily have the energetic bandwidth to do. But I know that when I make the decision to do it, I'm going to be backed by source with the bandwidth to actually do it. And that's going to pivot in a million other directions, right? So we've made the decision to keep Haven home. And in one day, she comes home from school because we had to send her like another day or whatever. And she feels relief. And she is happy. And she feels supported. I won't. And this is for all the moms out there that are going, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I can see that my kids basically, a light is going out. But I don't have any other options. You are the option. I'm not saying make it super hard on yourself. I'm not saying like everybody has to do like pull their kid out of school if it's not working or whatever. But like, I know that it's really hard to advocate when you're a codependent person, even on behalf of your own children. And to some degree, I think maybe some codependents over-advocate, right? Maybe that would be true, but that's not me in this case, in the sense that like, I wouldn't go advocating at the school and like making a big fit, but I know that it's hard to stand up for what you want, what you believe. And I'm a person who's like, believe whatever you want, just don't make me believe it, right? Like, I'm not trying to make you believe anything either, but if you are that mom who is looking at a doctor tell you that this is what you should do for your kid, even though you're going like, that doesn't even feel close to okay for me. Or if you are that mom who is, or that dad who's in a system where you're like, what is happening and why is this the way that it is and why is this like allowed? These kids are going to be, they're, you know, I always say that I was thrown to the wolves socially. Every single one of these kids right now that has been quarantined during COVID and then thrown into a social situation where they're not allowed to touch, they're not allowed to like really, at a Waldorf school, my daughter's not allowed to speak when she doesn't have her mask on outside while they eat lunch. They're not allowed to talk at lunch. Every single thing that school is supposed to be for, as far as socialization, it has become the exact opposite of that, right? So now the question is, you know, their question would be before, oh, do homeschooled kids get adequate socialization? I mean, I would say that what's going on in schools is not actually adequate socialization, and it's setting them up for harm. And I really am on top of just the regular everyday stuff of like being either a neurodivergent person, just being a person who's like going to school as it is. That's hard enough, but in the middle of a pandemic, when your teachers are masked and screaming at you, and the students are supposed to stay 6 feet away from you, and then you ask to play, like, she's literally played by herself on the playground every single day, and it's great for her. And she's like, today she was like, I played werewolves by myself. Like, okay, great. I'm glad that she has that that capability of being that independent, but not in the face of a whole bunch of other kids that are like equally trying to figure it out and pushing each other away, but like trying to play. The ambivalence that is being set up in these kids is insane. I've talked about it before. Like, my daughter's natural impulse is to run and hug someone, and I watch her suck that in and rein it in all day when she's trying to, you know, like, that's so against who she is. And it took 3 months of being in school to watch this kid go from, I love everyone and everybody's happy, to, I'm not happy. I don't think I'm ever going to be happy again. Literally, these are her words. My heart is absolutely broken. I don't trust anybody that's not in my family at this point, which is like not really how we would have set it up to be for her. 3 months it took for her to be a rainbow to go gray. And most parents call that normal. That's not normal. That's not normal. Growing up doesn't have to look like that. I know people who never go gray. And if you're here, you're probably somebody who's gone gray. And if you have that wonderful, amazing light in your life that is still colorful, you are allowed to advocate on behalf of it. And actually, I think that you must. It doesn't mean you have to pull them out of school or whatever. I'm not suggesting that. What I am suggesting is that you know best. You know best for your kid. And again, I'm not like, oh, look at me saying that you know best for your kid. That means I know what's best for you. That's really not what I'm trying to say. What I am trying to say is I want to support you when you are blindsided by somebody else's suggestion that you should do something that goes against every one of the fibers of your moral and bodily being. And when you're stuck between a rock and a hard place and you feel like you have no options, I just want to put the power back in your hands and remind you that you are their option. You are the option. And you might feel like you don't have the bandwidth, and you might feel like, you know, I don't even know what that would look like to like come up with a different plan for this situation, or to advocate, or to stick up for them or for myself. But in the end, when you're going, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, you are the option, right? Like, you're allowed to advocate for your kid. Your kid deserves that. And I'm happy to be the mom that doesn't just push her through and let her play a game of catch up while she's called dumb for nothing. For what? Why would I do that to her? Because it's life? That's just the way it is? Kids bully each other? Absolutely not. That's not. I'm unwilling to engage in a world where that is normalized consistently. And that's the world I've been living in my whole life. And I just won't do it with her. I won't do it with her. And I hope if you have a little rainbow in your life that you see fading, you ask it to bring its life back and what it would need to be happy again. And you actually listen and honor it instead of saying, this is just the way life is. I'm sorry that you're going through this. I'm sorry she's going through this. And yes, this is just the way that life is. And I'm going to keep moving her until she finds her groove and a currency that actually works for her. If that takes until she's 20, if that takes her whole life, I'm going to keep moving her. And there's stability and protection. I'm not picking her up and just like whimsically putting her in all of these places. There is stability in me being the option and me choosing to protect her. So you're not alone if you feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. And if you're a mom or dad trying to advocate and you feel like the professionals look at you like you're insane and you doubt your own intuition because you're not the expert of your child's life, when really you are, I see you and I trust you. And I think that your kids will benefit from your trust and your own advocacy on their behalf. You're allowed to do that for your kid. You're allowed to do it without knowing. You're allowed to do it without having all the answers. You're allowed to do it without justifying why you're doing it, right? Haven wanted to come on and say something, but she's downstairs, but I hear her talking now. I actually wanted her to come on so you could see in one day the relief that she has experienced from just knowing that I'm willing to pull her and to homeschool her. I'm going to get my kid back, and I'm grateful. I'm going to get her back because I did this soon enough, right? So if you see your kid going gray, please advocate for their inner rainbow. Please advocate for their rainbow because they're in there. You just have to put them in a happy place so they can shine, right? You just have to find the place where they're actually able to shine. And no matter what it takes, you're allowed to do that. It doesn't mean they're failing. It doesn't mean you're failing, right? So I hope this was helpful. And I see you and I love you and you're super brave. And I know exactly what it's like to look at the experts and go like, okay, I think I don't want to do this, but okay, because you're telling me I should. No. Your kid deserves your advocacy. They're not lying to you about how hard it is for them. They're not making up excuses. When they're sick in the morning, they're stressed out. They're not like being a hypochondriac to get out of something, right? Like, believe what your kids tell you when they tell you what they tell you. Don't call them liars, right? Like, I see, I actually have like a couple friends who will be like, Haven, you're a liar. And I'm like, dude, don't say that to my kid. Like, no, she's 6 and she's in an imaginatory state. That doesn't mean that they're lying and that they're liars, right? Projections are powerful. And when we tell them, they download. And guess what? Then they don't want to, like my mom raised me not to be a quitter. And I grew up kind of a quitter. Like, there's not a lot that I'm like feel inclined to stick with for the rest of my life. I'm okay with that at this point. But yeah, the reversal thing that happens when you are like telling a kid that they're a liar when they're 6 is that then they go, ooh, there's a charge there. I don't want to be that. And then they get impulsively become a liar because they can't stop the impulse because they have the download that that's what they are, right? And it's not even true in the beginning. They're 6 and they're using their imagination. So believe them. And it's probably harder for them actually than it even was for you, despite the fact that, like, I can look at her and be like, I gave you everything. I'm giving you everything. This is easier for you than it was for me. But I know because of the way that she feels and the way that she processes things in her sensory body, that it's actually, and this is the weird thing, I thought like, oh, if my mom put me in a different situation, blah, blah, blah. I blame her a lot for where I was, but it's equally as hard for my daughter, despite that she's in an easier circumstance. She still has the same wiring. She still has the same body. it's hard for her. And sometimes parents can look down and go, well, it's easier for you because I had it this way and I had it that hard. So like you actually have it easy. And we think we're over giving and over delivering when we give them things that are going to make them comfortable and make them easy. And we're going to make them soft because they had it actually easier than we do. But no, I mean, they're coming in with similar bodies and it's exactly as hard probably for them as it was for us. And all we can do is be soft where it is hard for them and just keep looking, right? All right. I want to, and not even super from an unhealed place, but I really am willing to be the mother who advocates, where I was a person who never ever had that. My teachers were always right. I was never believed. I was never seen. And if my kid says to me, I don't feel safe with my teacher, I believe her. I believe her. She's entitled to that reality. And she's entitled to find a newer, better one. So I hope this is helpful for you guys in some way. One day of making a decision that I didn't really want to have to make, we all feel relieved because we made it. And I know that I'm going to be backed by source in the implementation of it. So trust yourself, trust your kids, and you know what's best. Bye.